In the United States, nearly 600,000 people are reported missing every single year. Most are found within 48 hours. A misunderstanding. A dead phone battery. A detour taken without telling anyone. But then, there are the others. The fraction of a percent who don't just leave, but evaporate. No digital footprint. No tire tracks. No goodbye. Elias Thorne was a man of routine. A 28-year-old high school history teacher who lived by the clock. He graded papers on Tuesdays, visited his mother on Thursdays, and hiked the Cascades on Saturdays. He was safe. He was predictable. Until a rainy Tuesday in November, when Elias Thorne drove his silver sedan onto Route 9, turned a corner, and was never seen again. His colleagues described him as incredibly punctual, someone who would call if he was even 5 minutes late. By 10 a.m., after repeated calls to his cell phone went straight to voicemail, the school principal contacted the Pineview Sheriff's Department. Initially, the response was standard procedure. A deputy was dispatched to Elias's small, tidy rental house on the edge of town. There were no signs of forced entry. His wallet and keys were gone, suggesting he had left willingly. His laptop was open on the kitchen table, a half-finished lesson plan on the screen. The only thing out of place was a half-eaten breakfast and a cold cup of coffee. It was as if he had simply walked out mid-morning and never come back. But his car, the silver sedan, was also missing. The initial theory was simple: maybe he just needed a break. A personal day. But that theory quickly fell apart. His mother, Eleanor Thorne, confirmed she hadn't heard from him. His friends were all contacted, and none had any idea where he might be. He hadn't mentioned any trips or plans to leave town. As the first 48 hours passed with no word, the case was officially upgraded to a high-risk missing person investigation. Search and rescue teams were assembled. They began combing the vast, dense forests that surround Pineview, focusing on the hiking trails Elias was known to frequent. Volunteers from the community joined in, a testament to how well-liked he was. They searched for days, battling the relentless November rain and fog of the Pacific Northwest. They found nothing. No footprints, no discarded clothing, no sign of a struggle. It was as if the forest had swallowed him whole. The digital search was just as fruitless. The last ping from Elias's cell phone was recorded at 8:47 a.m. on Tuesday, the day he disappeared. It pinged off a tower located along Route 9, the main road leading out of Pineview. His bank accounts showed no activity after a small gas purchase he made early Tuesday morning. He was a man with a stable job, a close relationship with his family, and a strong network of friends. There was no apparent reason for him to abandon his life. The breakthrough, or what seemed like one, came a week into the investigation. Inside, everything appeared normal. His hiking backpack was on the passenger seat, containing a water bottle and some granola bars. But Elias was not there. The keys were also missing. The car's location only deepened the mystery. It was a spot Elias knew well, a starting point for several of his favorite trails. But it also suggested a new, chilling possibility. Did he arrive here to go for a hike and meet with an accident? Or did someone else drive the car here to throw investigators off the trail? The area was searched again, this time with an even larger team and canine units. For 2 weeks, they scoured every inch of the surrounding wilderness. Yet again, they found absolutely nothing. The absence of any physical evidence led investigators to look deeper into Elias's life, searching for any hidden conflicts or secrets. But the man they found was exactly who he appeared to be. His students adored him, describing him as an engaging and passionate teacher who made history come alive. His friends called him loyal and dependable, the guy you could always count on. His finances were in order. He had no known enemies, no gambling debts, no secret relationships. The closest thing to a conflict was a professional disagreement with a fellow teacher months prior, but it was minor and had been resolved quickly. Elias Thorne seemed to be a genuinely good person living a quiet, unassuming life. This lack of any obvious motive or lead was what made the case so maddening for everyone involved. He wasn't the type of person who got into trouble. He was the type of person who helped others out of it. The yellow missing person posters began to fade on telephone poles around town. For the community of Pinaview, life had to go on, but a shadow of uncertainty remained. Unofficial searches, organized by friends and dedicated volunteers, continued on weekends. They held onto the hope that they might find a clue the official search had missed. Theories began to swirl online and in local coffee shops. Some believed he had a hiking accident, his body simply yet to be found in the vast, rugged terrain. Others speculated he may have been the victim of a random carjacking, his abductor leaving the car at the viewpoint as a decoy. A more far-fetched theory suggested he had decided to start a new life, meticulously planning his disappearance to leave no trace behind. But this didn't fit the man everyone knew. Why would someone so rooted in his community, so connected to his family? One of the most persistent theories revolved around his routine. On the morning he vanished, Elias had stopped for gas and coffee, just like he did every Tuesday. He drove a familiar route. Could someone have been watching him? Could his predictability have made him a target? Investigators explored this angle extensively. They reviewed hours of security camera footage from the gas station and other businesses along Route 9. The footage confirmed his movements that morning. He appeared calm, normal. There was no one following him, no suspicious vehicles nearby. It was a dead end. Every lead that seemed promising eventually dissolved into nothing, adding another layer of frustration to the case. You could see the outline of a life, but you couldn't figure out how it ended. Today, years later, the disappearance of Elias Thorne is still an active missing persons case, though it has long gone cold. For his mother, Eleanor, the pain is a constant companion. She still keeps his room exactly as he left it, holding onto the faint hope that he might one day walk through the door. The community of Pinaview hasn't forgotten him either. Each year on the anniversary of his disappearance, a small vigil is held at the trailhead where his car was found. They share stories, light candles, and keep his memory alive. The case serves as a chilling example of how a person can simply disappear from the modern world, despite our interconnectedness and technology. To understand the disappearance, we first have to understand the man. In the small town of Pinaview, Oregon, Elias wasn't just a resident, he was a fixture. Friends describe him as the kind of guy who still returned his shopping cart to the corral. He was the golden boy of the local school district. Elias wasn't impulsive. That's the thing people don't get. If he was going to be 5 minutes late to a faculty meeting, he'd text you 10 minutes beforehand. He was planning a trip to D.C. for the summer. He had bought tickets. People who are planning to vanish don't buy non-refundable tickets. His digital life reflected a man with roots. He had just renewed his lease. He had an active dating profile, though he hadn't been on a date in weeks. His bank statements showed purchases at the local grocery store, the gas station, and an online bookstore. Nothing erratic, nothing that signaled danger. Pinaview is a town where neighbors watch out for neighbors. It's the kind of place where, if you leave your front door open, someone calls to let you know, but it's also a town on the edge of the wilderness. To the west, civilization. To the east, hundreds of miles of dense and forgiving national forest. Elias loved that forest. He spent his weekends on the marked trails. He knew the dangers of the woods, the sudden storms, the treacherous footing. But on the day he disappeared, Elias wasn't hiking. He wasn't out for a leisurely stroll. He was doing something far more dangerous. He was running an errand on a night when he should have stayed home. This is where his story, a story he'd meticulously planned, goes completely off the rails. What happened to Elias Thorne? To understand the mystery, we have to go back to the beginning, to the last time anyone saw him alive. Let's walk through the last confirmed hours of Elias Thorne's life, starting on the afternoon of November 14, 2023. At 3:15 p.m., the final bell rings at Pinaview High, where Elias taught history. The school's security cameras capture him walking through the parking lot. He's dressed for the weather, wearing a dark blue rain jacket, and he's carrying his familiar leather satchel. He even stops to chat with the janitor for about 30 seconds. According to the janitor, Elias seemed relaxed, completely normal. Just another teacher heading home after a long day. There was no sign of distress, no hint of the darkness that was about to unfold. Just 30 minutes later, at 3:45 p.m., Elias makes a stop at The Grind, a local coffee spot he frequented. The barista, a young man named Mark, remembers their interaction clearly. He later told police that Elias ordered his usual, a black coffee and a blueberry scone. They made small talk. Elias mentioned he was heading home to grade papers, a classic teacher complaint. But he also said he needed to make one more stop first, the hardware store, to pick up a new space heater for his chilly apartment. It was a mundane conversation, the kind you have 100 times and forget instantly. But for Elias, it would be his last. At 4:30 p.m., we get the next piece of the puzzle. A transaction is recorded at Miller's Hardware. The receipt shows the purchase of one portable space heater. This transaction is crucial because it marks the last financial footprint Elias Thorne will ever leave. After this moment, there are no more credit card swipes, no ATM withdrawals, no digital trace of his spending. It's as if, from a financial perspective, he simply ceased to exist. He paid for the heater, walked out of the store, and vanished from the grid. Now, this is where the timeline fractures, where the clear, logical path of a man running errands dissolves into uncertainty. Elias lives just 3 miles north of the hardware store. It should have been a quick, 10-minute drive home. But he never made it. At 5:12 p.m., nearly 45 minutes after leaving the hardware store, traffic cameras, which are scarce in this part of the county, catch a fleeting glimpse of his silver sedan. But it's not heading north toward his apartment. It's turning south, onto Route 9. Route 9 is a lonely, 2-lane road with no streetlights, carving a path through dense woods. It doesn't lead to his apartment. It doesn't lead to his parents' house, or to the school, or to any other place he was known to frequent. Route 9 leads out of town, toward the old, disused logging roads and eventually, the state line. It's the kind of road you only take if you have a specific, and often secluded, destination in mind. So the question that haunts this case is simple. Why did Elias turn south? Was he meeting someone in secret? Was he following someone? Or was the most terrifying possibility the truth that someone else was already in the car with him, directing his every move? The last piece of electronic data we have from Elias Thorne comes from his cell phone. At 6:02 p.m., just under an hour after he was seen turning onto Route 9, his phone pings a cell tower. This tower is located deep within the expansive Greenwood State Forest, the same forest Elias knew so well from his weekend hikes. The ping didn't come from a call or a text message. It was an automatic data update, a digital ghost whispering from the woods. After that single ping, his phone went silent out forever. Was the signal lost because the battery died? Was the phone destroyed? Or did he, or someone else, turn it off intentionally, plunging his final moments into total darkness? The forest held the answer, but it wasn't talking. The next morning, when Elias didn't show up for his first period class, the school called his emergency contact, his older sister, Sarah. She wasn't immediately worried. Elias was responsible, but maybe he was just sick. She called his cell phone. It went straight to voicemail. She drove to his apartment, using her spare key to let herself in. The apartment was pristine, almost sterile. A stack of ungraded papers sat on his kitchen table next to a cold cup of coffee. The new space heater, still in its box, was just inside the door. But Elias was gone. The only thing out of place was a small, muddy footprint near the doorway, a footprint that police would later determine did not match any of Elias's own shoes. When the police began their investigation, they focused on Elias's car. It was the key. They knew it was a silver sedan, last seen on Route 9 heading toward Greenwood State Forest. They issued a bolo be on the lookout alert and organized search parties. For 2 long days, volunteers and law enforcement combed the access roads and main trails of the forest. The weather was brutal, with relentless rain turning the ground into a muddy swamp. They found nothing. It was as if the car, and Elias, had been swallowed by the trees. Then, on the 3rd day of the search, a breakthrough. A park ranger, flying a drone over a remote, heavily wooded section of the forest, spotted something. It was a glint of metal, almost completely obscured by the dense canopy of pine trees. A ground team was dispatched. They had to hack their way through thick underbrush for nearly a mile off the nearest trail. And there, nestled in a small ravine, they found it, Elias Thorne's silver sedan. The car was stuck deep in mud, its front bumper crumpled against a large oak tree. But what they found inside and what they didn't find only deepened the mystery. The car doors were unlocked. The keys were still in the ignition. Elias's wallet and phone were gone, but his leather satchel was on the passenger seat. Inside were his laptop and a folder of student essays. The blueberry scone he'd bought at the coffee shop was on the dashboard and eaten. And on the driver's seat, neatly folded, was his dark blue rain jacket. The scene raised more questions than it answered. If this was a car accident, why would he take his wallet and phone but leave his satchel? Why would he fold his jacket so neatly? And most importantly, where was Elias? The search area now had a center point, but the terrain was a nightmare. The forest floor was a maze of fallen trees, thick brush, and steep, slippery inclines. K-9 units were brought in, but the constant rain had washed away any potential scent trail. For weeks, hundreds of volunteers searched, their bright orange vests a stark contrast against the grim, gray woods. They searched in expanding circles from the car, covering miles of unforgiving wilderness. They found a few discarded water bottles and old campfire rings, but no sign of Elias Thorne. No clothing, no footprint, no clue. As winter set in, the official search was scaled back, leaving a family with no answers and a community haunted by the man who walked into the woods and never came out. In the months that followed, with the official search all but over, theories began to swirl. The police initially leaned toward the idea that Elias had gotten his car stuck, left to find help, and succumbed to the elements. He knew the woods, but a cold, rainy night can disorient even an experienced hiker. It's a plausible theory, but it doesn't explain the missing wallet and phone, or the neatly folded jacket. And it doesn't account for why he was on that remote road in the first place. Then there was the theory of voluntary disappearance. Could Elias have staged the whole thing? Was he running from something or someone? His finances were clean, he had no known debts, and by all accounts, he was happy with his job and his life. Friends and family described him as predictable, even boring. He wasn't the type for grand, dramatic gestures. The idea that he would abandon his life, his students, and his family without a word just didn't fit the man they knew. That leaves the most sinister theory, foul play. This is the theory his sister Sarah clings to. She believes that the muddy footprint in his apartment and the strange detour onto Route 9 point to someone else being involved. Was Elias ambushed in his apartment and forced to drive to the forest? Was he meeting someone there for a clandestine purpose that went horribly wrong? The police looked into his relationships, his online activity, his life, searching for anyone with a motive. They found nothing. No disgruntled student, no jealous lover, no secret enemy. Elias Thorne, the quiet history teacher, seemed to have no secrets. Today, the case of Elias Thorne remains cold. His car sits in a police impound lot, a silent monument to his last known hours. The forest keeps its secrets, its deep ravines and dense undergrowth a potential resting place for the answers everyone is desperate to find. For his family, the pain of not knowing is a constant ache. Every time it rains, his sister thinks of him, out there somewhere in the cold, dark woods. The mystery of what happened on Route 9 is a ghost that hangs over the small town of Pineview, a chilling reminder that sometimes, the most ordinary days can end in the most inexplicable darkness. The story of Elias Thorne is a story without an ending, a timeline that just stops, and perhaps the most terrifying part is that we may never know why. Wednesday morning arrived with a cold drizzle. At Pineview High, the first bell rang at 8 o'clock a.m. Elias's first period history students were seated, waiting. By 8:15, the murmurs started. Elias Thorne had never missed a day of work without calling in. Not once in 5 years. The school administrator, a man known for his calm demeanor, felt a knot tighten in his stomach. He tried calling Elias's cell, but it went straight to voicemail. He sent a text. Then another. No reply. This was more than unusual. It was unheard of. At 8:30 a.m., the school followed protocol and called his emergency contact, his mother, Martha. She hadn't heard from him since he'd called her Monday evening, sounding perfectly normal. A wave of dread washed over her. She grabbed her keys and drove to his apartment immediately. His car, the dependable sedan he'd had since college, was gone. The lights were off. But inside, when she let herself in with the spare key, everything was eerily normal. A half-eaten bowl of cereal sat on the counter, a testament to a morning routine abruptly cut short. His wallet and keys were gone, but his laptop was on the desk, his teaching plans for the week still open. It looked like he had just stepped out for a moment. But one thing was missing, the box for a new space heater he'd just bought was gone. Why would he take the empty box? The police were notified at 9:45 a.m. Usually, law enforcement in the United States might observe a waiting period for adults, operating under the assumption they have the right to disappear. But given Elias's rigid routine and the alarming fact that he missed work without a word, the Pineview Sheriff's Department escalated the case immediately. They filed an emergency request to ping his cell phone. The result was a dead end. His phone was either turned off, out of battery, or destroyed. The last signal it sent was at 5:48 p.m. the previous day, Tuesday, pinging a tower near the Black River Bridge. After that, nothing. Just digital silence. The Black River Bridge. The name hung in the air at the sheriff's department. It wasn't on Elias's usual route to or from school, or anywhere else he was known to frequent. It was miles out of his way, a lonely stretch of road cutting through the dense and forgiving wilderness of the Blackwood State Forest. Why would he go there on a Tuesday evening? With the last known location identified, the search began. Sheriff's deputies and search and rescue volunteers converged on the area. The terrain was brutal, thick undergrowth, steep ravines, and the cold, fast-moving Black River itself. They scoured the roadsides, the pull-offs, and the winding dirt trails that branched off into the woods. The hours turned into a day, then two. They found nothing. No broken guardrails, no skid marks, no sign that a car had ever left the road. It was as if Elias's car had simply vanished into thin air after passing the cell tower. On the third day of the search, a volunteer named David, an experienced hiker, decided to check a less traveled access road about a mile south of the bridge. It was barely more than a muddy track, easily missed. And that's where he saw it. Tucked behind a thicket of overgrown bushes, almost invisible from the main path, was Elias's silver sedan. Relief quickly turned to confusion and fear. The car was locked. There were no signs of forced entry, no broken windows. Inside, everything looked undisturbed. Elias's jacket was folded neatly on the passenger seat. His phone charger was still plugged into the dashboard. But Elias was not there. The keys were also missing. The car was out of gas. This was a critical clue. Had he run out of fuel and set off on foot for help? The nearest gas station was over 10 miles away, a desperate walk through treacherous terrain, especially in the dark. Investigators carefully documented the scene. They noted the gas gauge on empty. They dusted for prints but found only Elias's. The scene was clean to clean. It felt staged. As investigators processed the car, a deputy noticed something on the back seat. Partially obscured by a blanket was the empty box for the new space heater, the very same one his mother had noticed was missing from his apartment. Why bring an empty box all the way out here? It made no sense. It was the first of many anomalies that would turn this case from a standard missing person investigation into a baffling enigma. But the most significant discovery was yet to come. While searching the trunk, deputies found Elias's hiking backpack. It was fully packed with a tent, a sleeping bag, a water filter, and several days' worth of non-perishable food. This wasn't the gear of someone who had simply run out of gas. This was the equipment of someone planning an extended stay in the wilderness. Had Elias planned to disappear? Was he camping? If so, why abandon his car with all his gear still inside it? The two narratives were in direct conflict. A man who runs out of gas by accident doesn't typically have a survival pack in his trunk. And a man planning a camping trip usually doesn't leave all his essential equipment behind. It was a contradiction that left investigators stumped. And then, there was the phone data. The digital forensics team managed to recover some limited information from service provider records before the phone went dark. His last call, just minutes before the 5:48 p.m. ping, was not to a friend or family member. It was to an enlisted number that routed to a disposable burner phone. They tried to trace it, but the trail went cold almost immediately. The call lasted only 22 seconds. What could be so urgent or secret to warrant a call to a burner phone right before he disappeared? With the car found, the focus of the search shifted. K-9 units were brought in. The dogs picked up Elias's scent from the driver's side door and followed it for about 100 yards along the muddy access road, heading deeper into the forest. And then, abruptly, the trail stopped. It didn't fade out, it just ended, as if he had been lifted straight up into the air. The handlers ran the dogs over the area again and again. The result was always the same. The scent was strong, and then it was gone. This scent stop phenomenon baffled even the most experienced canine handlers on the team. It could suggest the person got into another vehicle, but there were no tire tracks other than Elias's and the search team's. It could mean they crossed a body of water, but the Black River was a good half-mile away, and the scent didn't lead in that direction. Every logical explanation seemed to hit a dead end. The search continued for another week, a massive effort involving helicopters with thermal imaging drones, and dozens of volunteers combing the dense forest grid by grid. They found nothing. No footprints, no broken branches, no discarded items. Not a single clue to suggest where Elias Thorne had gone after he stepped out of his car and walked 100 yards down a muddy road. Frustrated and running out of options, investigators turned their attention back to Elias's life, digging deeper into his background, hoping to find a reason for his disappearance. They re-interviewed his friends, family, and colleagues. Everyone described him the same way: reliable, kind, a bit of a homebody. He was a dedicated teacher who loved his students. He had no known enemies, no significant debts, no history of mental health struggles. He was, by all accounts, a perfectly ordinary man. But as they dug, a few odd details began to surface. A colleague mentioned Elias had seemed a little distracted in the weeks leading up to his disappearance, more quiet than usual. He'd recently withdrawn $2,000 in cash from his bank account, a significant amount for someone with his frugal habits. When they checked his personal laptop from his apartment, they found recent search history that was deeply unsettling. He had been researching survival techniques, how to live off the grid, and, most disturbingly, old, unsolved disappearances within the Blackwood State Forest itself. It seemed Elias was not just a history teacher, he was a student of mystery. Was he researching for a book? Or was he planning something? The search for Elias Thorne was officially suspended after 14 days. Without new leads, the massive physical search was no longer sustainable. For the Pineview Sheriff's Department, it became a cold case. For his mother Martha, and for his students, it became a wound that would not heal. How could a man so methodical, so rooted in his routine, simply vanish? The anomalies piled up: the missing heater box, the packed survival bag left behind, the call to a burner phone, and the scent trail that stopped in the middle of nowhere. Each clue seemed to contradict the last, painting a portrait of a man who was simultaneously planning a deliberate escape and caught completely by surprise. It's a puzzle where none of the pieces fit. And the most haunting piece of all, the final ping from his cell phone, leaves us with one last, chilling question. What was waiting for Elias Thorne at the Black River Bridge? No signal. The phone was either dead, destroyed, or the battery had completely drained. The last ping authorities received was from a cell tower near Black River Bridge by noon the next day. A full-scale search and rescue operation was underway. Professional teams were scrambled, and soon, volunteers from the community poured in, eager to help. But searching the vast Oregon wilderness is like trying to find a needle in a haystack, except this haystack actively fights back with you. Dense forests, treacherous terrain, and unpredictable weather make every step a challenge. The initial search focused on the areas immediately surrounding the Black River Bridge, where Elias's phone had last connected. Teams on foot, on ATVs, and with K9 units began combing the thick undergrowth, their high-visibility vests a stark contrast against the deep greens and browns of the woods. They called his name, their voices swallowed by the immense silence of the forest. The hope was that he had simply gone for a hike and gotten lost, or perhaps had a minor accident and was waiting for rescue. But as the first day turned into night, with no sign of Elias, a sense of urgency began to set in. The search area was massive, and without a more precise location, the teams were essentially guessing, casting a wide net and hoping for a lucky break. The volunteers, though full of determination, were facing a monumental task. The terrain was unforgiving, with steep inclines, hidden ravines, and thick brush that could conceal anything or anyone. The dogs, highly trained as they were, struggled to pick up a scent in the swirling winds. Every rustle of leaves, every snapped twig, brought a momentary spike of hope, followed by the quiet disappointment of another false alarm. The reality of the situation was dawning on everyone involved. Finding Elias in this sprawling, untamed wilderness was going to be an immense, perhaps even impossible, undertaking. As the second day of the search began, the strategy shifted. The search area was expanded, and aerial support was called in. Helicopters buzzed overhead, their pilots scanning the landscape for any sign of color that didn't belong: a piece of clothing, a campfire, anything. But from the air, the forest canopy was a dense and broken sea of green, revealing none of its secrets. The mood among the searchers was becoming more somber. The initial optimism was being replaced by a grim determination. They established a grid system, methodically sweeping sections of the forest, ensuring no area was left unchecked. But with each passing hour, the odds were shrinking. The wilderness is a powerful force, and the longer someone is exposed to the elements without shelter or supplies, the more critical their situation becomes. The search continued, relentless and exhaustive, but by the end of the second day, there was still nothing, not a footprint, not a dropped item, not a single clue to suggest which direction Elias might have gone after his last phone signal. The haystack was winning. It took 3 long, agonizing days. Then, on Saturday morning, there was a breakthrough. It came not from the ground teams or the helicopters, but from a local drone operator who had volunteered his time and equipment. He was methodically scanning the remote logging roads that branched off the main highways, areas too difficult for cars to access easily. He spotted something metallic, a glint of silver reflecting the morning sunlight, deep within the tree canopy. It was roughly 4 miles down an abandoned logging road, a track so overgrown and washed out it was barely recognizable as a path. This road was miles from where the main search had been concentrated. It wasn't on any standard map as a through route. Why would Elias have turned down here? A new wave of adrenaline and hope surged through the search command. A team from the sheriff's department was immediately dispatched. The drive to the location was a challenge in itself. The police dashcam footage shows the difficulty they faced, with thick branches scraping and smacking against the windshield as the vehicle crawled over the rough, rutted terrain. It was clear this was not a road meant for a standard passenger car. After several tense minutes of navigating the treacherous path, they saw it. Through a clearing in the trees, a silver sedan came into view. It was parked aggressively, at a strange angle, its front bumper wedged deep into a muddy bank on the side of the road. It was Elias's car. The vehicle wasn't crashed in a conventional sense. There was no major impact damage. Instead, it looked as though someone had tried to execute a hasty, panicked three-point turn on the narrow track and had slid, getting the front wheels hopelessly stuck in the soft, wet earth. The position of the car spoke of urgency, maybe even fear. Deputies approached cautiously, their service weapons drawn, not knowing what they would find. They fanned out. Scanning the immediate area around the vehicle, the forest was eerily quiet. They called out his name. Silence. The car itself was an enigma. All the windows were rolled up tight. A slow pan of the exterior showed no signs of a struggle, no broken glass, no damage other than the front bumper being stuck in the mud. A deputy wearing gloves tried the driver's side door handle. It was locked. All the doors were. From the outside, the car looked clean, almost undisturbed. No sign of Elias. No blood on the seats visible through the windows. No shattered glass on the ground. It was as if the car had just been left there. But when the deputies managed to pop the lock and swing the driver's door open, the mystery didn't clear up. It deepened. Inside, the scene was both mundane and baffling. Sitting on the passenger seat, still in its original box, was the space heater Elias had bought just hours before he disappeared. His wallet was there too, tucked into the center console, containing his ID and a significant amount of cash. A half-drunk cup of coffee sat in the cup holder, as if he'd just set it down. But two crucial items were gone. The car keys were missing. And so was his cell phone. Nothing else seemed out of place. There were no signs of a robbery, given the cash and wallet were left behind. There were no signs of a violent struggle inside the car. Elias had simply vanished from his locked car, in the middle of nowhere, taking only his keys and his phone, and leaving everything else behind. Why would he abandon his car on a remote logging road? Why leave his wallet, but take his keys if the car was stuck? The discovery of the car wasn't an answer, it was the beginning of a dozen more questions. The search for Elias now had a new, deeply puzzling epicenter, but the man himself was still a ghost. His wallet was in the center console, cash untouched. This ruled out robbery immediately. The space heater was in the back seat, but the keys and his phone were gone. If he had walked away to get help, why leave the wallet? And why lock the car? Forensics swept the vehicle. They found fingerprints all belonging to Elias. But they found something else, a detail that the lead detective couldn't shake. Elias was 5'9", average build. When the detective sat in that driver's seat, he couldn't reach the pedals. The seat was pushed all the way back, as far as it could go. Someone much taller than Elias drove that car last. This changed everything. If Elias wasn't driving when the car got stuck, who was? And where was Elias? The timeline was re-examined. Remember the turn onto Route 9 at 5:12 p.m. Police subpoenaed his phone records. At 5:10 p.m., just 2 minutes before the car turned away from safety, Elias received a text message. It wasn't from a contact saved in his phone. It was from a burner number prepaid phone with no registered owner. The message was simple: "I know what you found, meet me." I know what you found. 5 words that turned a missing person case into a potential homicide investigation. What did a high school history teacher find? Was it something in the history books, or something in the present? To find Elias, the police had to figure out who was on the other end of that phone, and the trail led them to a person nobody in Pinaview expected. Within 48 hours, police cracked Elias's laptop. They were braced for the usual secrets: a hidden relationship, maybe a mountain of debt, but what they found was a history project. Elias had been digging deep into something called the Pinaview land grant. It was a huge stretch of forest, sold just 3 months earlier to a private logging company, Vance Timber. As they sifted through his files, a picture emerged from scanned public records, old newspaper clippings from the 50s, and dusty land survey maps. Elias's research pointed to a colossal clerical error. A mistake made way back in 1952, according to his detailed notes. The very land Vance Timber was about to clear-cut didn't actually belong to the seller. It belonged to the state. If Elias went public with this, the multi-million-dollar deal would be frozen in an instant. Suddenly, that cryptic text message made perfect, chilling sense. I know what you found. It was never about a body or a dark secret from Elias's past. It was about the land. The police developed a new theory. Elias believed he was going to meet a whistleblower, an insider ready to help him expose the truth. But he wasn't meeting a hero. He was walking into a trap set by a fixer. Remember the driver's seat in Elias's car? It was pushed all the way back, set for someone much taller than him. Investigators traced the burner phone that sent the text. The signal led them to a quick mart on the edge of town. They pulled the CCTV footage from the day before Elias vanished. And there he was. A tall man, his face hidden by a baseball cap, buying that exact phone with cash. As he walked out, he passed the height strip on the door frame. The camera captured it clearly. He was 6'4". His name, Lucas Vance. He was the son of the logging company's owner. Police body cam footage shows them knocking on the door of his trailer. The case had just taken a very sharp, very dangerous turn.